Hello and welcome to the F1Stop show. I'm your host, Sam Only, and with me is Wes Spearman. This is episode 32. Wes, how are you this evening?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I've only just noticed that we've both got the same background on Zoom. So with me being on, I don't know which way you've got it round, but it's sort of it's like a mirror of each other on my screen, which is quite interesting. Obviously,
Yeah,
anchors five by listeners won't know what we're on about, but yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, then yeah, this will probably look a bit weird. But yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
yeah, I'm good, thank you. Well, for those who are watching Mexico, I'm not quite sure if they're good or probably just bored.
Probably still asleep, I reckon.
Probably, yeah.
They haven't
Um,
woken up.
because round 20 was Mexico City Grand Prix, and it doesn't come as a surprise who won in Max Verstappen for Red Bull. That's 14 wins this season, the most in F1 history. 14 F1 wins. What'd you make of it?
Just incredible, really. I know. I think all three of us predicted a Perez win, but I think that was more out of hope than, than on actual sort of who we thought was going to win. But yeah, I mean, Verstappen and Red Bull are just a match made in heaven, aren't they? And yeah, the Red Bull have got such a dominant car this season. I mean, you wouldn't have said that at the start of the season, but yeah, the way the season panned out, Ferrari were nowhere in Mexico at all, and yeah, Verstappen. I mean, I think people were thinking, oh, maybe it could be a bit interesting going into turn one on the first lap, just because that start finish straight in Mexico is so long. The Mercedes might have had a chance to maybe dive down the inside or something, but absolutely not. Verstappen was just too quick, and I think it only took him a couple of laps to get over about a 1.5 second lead, which yeah is not massive, but it's enough, comfortable enough, you think. Um, yeah, it's just incredible. And I mean, I know this season is longer than most F1 seasons, 22 races, but some people might say, "Oh, that gives Verstappen more chances to win to win more races," but also gives other drivers more chances to win races as well. Um, yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, is only won two world titles. I mean, he's going to make that in five, six, seven, eight. Who knows how many if these two, if Verstappen and Red Bull keep performing to the standard they're set this year. I can see him. I can see him winning both of these next races in Brazil and Abu Dhabi. I can see him winning 16 out of 22 races
Oh,
in a
of
season,
course, definitely.
which is
Yeah.
just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I don't know what that is percentage wise, but it's a hell of a lot. Yeah,
16 out of 22. That's like,
16 out of 22.
oh, we're looking at 70, no, yeah,
Let's get the
75?
calculator out.
I'm gonna say
Yeah,
75%.
just under 73%,
Okay,
72.7%, which is,
okay.
I mean, that's just incredible,
I
really.
was
I mean,
closer.
when you got, yeah, there's 20 drivers on the grid, and but realistically, only six of those can win races. Although this season it's been four of those, really. I mean, Mercedes, I suppose this weekend and arguably last weekend were their best chances of
Mm,
getting a race win. But we do have Brazil coming up. I know Hamilton is very strong around Brazil. I mean, just look what happened last year. I know this isn't a Brazil preview episode, but yeah, I think next week is going to be interesting when we talk about that race again. Um, yeah, I mean, Verstappen was just again. How many times do we say this? Dominant. It's just another dominant drive from Verstappen. We needed to count up at the end of this season. We need to count up how many times we call Verstappen dominant in terms of his race wins, because it'll be a lot. It'll be if he wins all 16, I bet it'll be about 14 out of those 16 we've said that Verstappen has been dominant.
yeah,
I think
I
he's
agree.
had to fight for a couple. But yeah, I think this weekend in Mexico it was it was his easiest race win of the season. I think no one could really challenge him at all. And yeah, good strategy from Red Bull. Start on the softs, move on to the mediums, and I think the tire wear was I think less than what the teams were expecting. Actually, whether it's a temperature thing or whether it was cooler than people expected, I don't know. But yeah, the tires worked well, and yeah, Verstappen again dominant. What more can you say?
Um, I can only agree with what you've said there because Verstappen, he's been all season, he's been in a league of his own. I look back at that Saudi Arabia race when he said, "Oh, my title challenges are out of the window," something like that. And then what, 18, 19 races later, he was world champion in Japan, and now he's not only picked up his 14th win of the season, but I think he's also collected the most championship points in an
Yes, yes,
F1
he has.
season,
Yeah,
416.
yeah, more than Hamilton in 2019, I think,
Yeah,
is the record he broke. I mean, he had the third or fourth most with his number of points from last year as well. So, the most point. I mean, he's on for another potential 52 more points here, if you think about it.
yeah.
25 for the win, plus a couple extra for the fastest lap. Which, yeah, again, just ridiculous. And he's only, what, 24 years old as well, which is the scary part. We've got another 10, 15 years of Verstappen. I mean, yeah, there will be regulation changes in that time, and teams will sort of peak and trough, but it's scary to think about how many more, how many years of Verstappen and Red Bull dominance we could be looking at, potentially anyway.
So into the race we go. Um, well, I don't even know where to start. Let's start with Mercedes and their tire strategy, as you mentioned. They started on the mediums and switched to the hards, which didn't quite work out, especially for Lewis Hamilton, as he looks like the more likely driver to win the race. It just didn't work out for him, did he?
No, not at all. And I think you kept see. I think you heard Hamilton say over the radio a few times, like, "I'll be on the right tires here." And you heard Pete Bonington, race engineer, say, "Yeah, well, the Red Bull's mediums will drop off at some point. We are on the right tire here. We can get to the end of the race with no problems." But the Red Bull's mediums just didn't drop off. They kept going at a decent pace, and yeah, it was. I mean, you don't often say this about Mercedes, but it was the wrong strategy. I think. I mean, had seen loads of memes about Ferrari and their strategy, but yeah, Mercedes didn't have a good strategy this weekend. I mean, yeah, starting on the slower tire, and then switching to an even slower tire in the race. Yes, that would have guaranteed them to finish the race, but I think you could take the medium to round about to the mid 40s in terms of lap time, which gets you through two-thirds of the race pretty much, or well, not quite that, but just over halfway anyway. And yeah, the softs lasted a good amount of time as well. And yeah, I think Mexico is not harsh on the tyres, but reasonably harsh, especially in the second sector where it's just quite fast and not quite flat out, but
Mm.
quite twisty and turny. And there aren't many sort of slow corners, if you like, besides the stadium section. But yeah, the tyres just lasted longer than I think people were expecting, and yeah, it didn't work out for Mercedes, and I don't think it worked out for Ferrari. Yeah, I think they were on a similar strategy to Red Bull, but I mean, Ferrari, as I mentioned earlier, just so far off the pace. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think if I mean, even if Mercedes had the same strategy as Red Bull or a similar strategy, I don't think they would have won. I think the Red Bulls were just too quick, excuse me, for them this weekend. Um, yeah, I mean, for Verstappen to win by, I think it was around about 15 seconds in the end. Maybe if Mercedes had the right strategy, they could maybe have potentially challenged for that race win this weekend.
And George Russell in the other Mercedes car, he finished what, P5, I believe. I'm not quite sure where he finished.
P4,
P4, P5.
Yeah, P4 and fastest lap.
Well, having started on the front row and well, as you said, finished P4. How would you assess his race in Mexico? It was a bit sensible, would you, if you like?
Um, a bit sort of mediocre, if you like. I mean, you never want to go back places in a Grand Prix, and for
Hmm.
him to lose, I suppose one place at the end of the day. But I mean, Mercedes would have been eyeing up a double podium, especially after the strong qualifying they had, out qualifying both Ferraris. I mean, Valtteri Bottas out qualified Charles Leclerc. That just shows how slow Ferrari were all weekend. Yeah, Mercedes would have been eyeing up a double podium, and I suppose it is a little bit disappointing they didn't get that. But It's good points for them at the end of the day. A poor weekend for Ferrari means Mercedes edge closer to Ferrari for second in the constructors. I'm just looking at the points at the moment. They're only 40 points behind now, Mercedes and Ferrari. And again, looking at the sort of first few rounds of the season, you'd be thinking, well, Mercedes aren't going to be anywhere near challenging. They're sort of settled in for third place in the constructors. But now, actually, it's getting quite interesting. Two more races to go. Mercedes could very well reel in Ferrari as second place in the constructors. And yeah, I suppose probably what Mercedes will be looking at now. Drivers, I mean, both championships are out the window now for anyone. Yeah, it's those battle for second place now. I think Perez is obviously more solidified his place in second in the drivers' standings after his podium and a poor result for Leclerc. And yeah, Mercedes will be hoping they can get some solid points in these next two races.
Now, we've talked about Mercedes. We've talked about Ferrari's, well, non-existent
Slowness.
Grand Prix.
I know.
Um,
Yeah, it pretty much was non-existent. They just weren't
yeah,
anywhere.
but we want to talk about one man who has, well, you can't say he has a season to forget. One man who has struggled a lot this season, and that is McLaren's Daniel Ricciardo. You know, coming into a new team is not always easy, but it's always important to learn the trade, see what your targets are, and to just, try and meet those targets, and if you can't meet those targets, then people are going to start asking questions, you know? But Ricardo, he had a different mindset coming into Mexico this weekend.
Yeah, he always had a race of two halves, if you like. And the first half was very sort of Daniel Ricciardo over the last year and a bit at McLaren, quite sort of not much there, if you like. And when he went for that move on, I think he overtook someone, I can't remember who now, reasonably early on. I think it was one of the Alphas, Zhou Guan Yu, which I think was one of your questions last week, the higher or lower, who would finish higher, Ricardo or Joe. And I think
So
I said Joe, and I think I said
yeah,
Joe, and Henry
so I
said
think
Ricardo.
the question was in terms of qualifying, who would finish higher or lower, Joe or Ricciardo? And I think this is qualifying. This is not end of the race. And I think
All right.
if I'm
I think
correct,
Ricardo qualified out qualified Joe as well by one place. They were 11th and 12th, I think.
oh wow, well that's something. And what did we say?
Uh,
Guan Yu Zhou?
yeah, I said yeah Joe to out qualify Ricardo. Henry said Ricardo to out qualify Joe.
Oh wow.
So Henry's got me on both there in terms of qualifying and race finish.
Well done, Henry. You got 1 point there. But back to Ricardo. I mean, he had a great second half to the race, we've got to say. Getting, I mean, to get P7, that's very impressive for a man who's been under a lot of heat, if you like.
Yeah, he's been under a lot of pressure to perform. I mean, I suppose that pressure is kind of off now that people know he's not going to be racing for McLaren or in F1 at all next year, I suppose, which is a bit sad. And hopefully he'll be back for the 2024 season. But yeah, I mean that movie made on Sonoda at turn 6, I think it was there or thereabouts. I mean, we've seen Ricardo do these incredible late move dive bombs, if you like, and this one just seemed sort of half-hearted. It seemed quite cautious of Ricardo, and it was like he was sort of caught between two minds, sort of, oh, do I, don't I? And was caught in no man's land, and yeah, ended out, I suppose, worse off for Sonoda because he was forced to retire from the race. And I think from that moment on, Ricardo, it was almost like a switch just flipped inside his head. He just thought, like, right, hang on a second, I've got to make up 10 seconds somehow. Let's just let's just try and do that. And yeah, it was just an incredible comeback drive, if you like, and earned him driver of the day as well. Um, he was down in around about P11, P12 when he crashed into Sonoda. And yeah, to make it back to P7, overtaking where I know it's gone overtaking Ocon, overtaking Bottas, Alonso, Ocon again for P7, and then to finish 10 seconds in front of Ocon, so his penalty was essentially nullified. Is quite a comeback drive, and yeah, probably one of his best drives for quite some time. I think certainly of this year. I can't remember Ricciardo putting in a performance quite like that this year. It's a bit of a shame he got that penalty, but at the end of the day, I don't suppose it really mattered. He finished P7 on the track, and yeah, finished P7 after penalties applied as well. And yeah, as I say, a great comeback and probably the highlight of the race. There weren't many highlights of the race, let's be honest. I think my two highlights of this weekend were Ricardo's comeback drive
Yeah.
and the mariachi band F1 theme tune, which is just
Oh
brilliant.
yeah,
I
I
want
heard
that for
that as
every
well.
single Mexican Grand Prix from now on. That was absolutely brilliant.
It was, yeah, I agree with you. I love that mariachi band. Very, very good, very creative. Um, but yeah, 20 races down, just two to go, people. Just two left. Um, Brazil and Abu Dhabi. So not this weekend, but the weekend after is Interlagos in Brazil. Um, if you cast your mind back 12 months ago, it was Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, lap 48, drama. Am I right, Wes?
I don't know which lap it was, but it sounds about right. I think. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, we'll probably talk about it in more depth next week on the preview. But yeah, I think that was one of the best races of last season. There were a number of good races last season, like there were this year.
Hmm,
Although having said that, when we talked about it off air before recording, I can't remember many sort of standout drives from the. I can remember a few boring ones. I mean, Mexico, I think, is easily the most boring of the 2022 season, but Monaco, obviously.
yeah,
Um, there was one other, I can't remember what it was now.
Miami.
Miami, yeah, that was another one which was not a lot happened, but yeah, Mexico has been just the most boring of them all. Arguably more boring than Monaco, perhaps. Who fought up this?
Yeah,
Actually, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I think Ricardo might have just saved it from that title, but I think the thing with Mexico is that I mean the vibes are great, the crowd is great, and the whole sort of hype around it is brilliant. But the actual track itself doesn't offer many overtaking opportunities. I suppose the main one is after the start finish straight in turn one, where you've got that heavy braking zone, and obviously I think most people get their moves done with DRS before before that corner anyway. I suppose going into turn four as well, when you've got that slightly shorter straight. But other than that, there aren't many places to overtake, and um, you can't remember many exciting Mexican Grand Prix since it was reintroduced in 2014.
no,
I think Verstappen is he now the most successful driver at Mexico? He's won 3 Mexican Grand Prix.
three,
He's certainly up there, yeah,
including this year.
including this year. Yeah. I think Hamilton's won 2 and Rosberg's won 1, and Verstappen won 17, 19, and 22, I think, if I'm right, or
Wow.
last year. I don't know. I can't remember now. I just know Verstappen's won 3, possibly the last 2 in 2019.
Cool.
Um, I can't remember where we were going now. Sort of boring races and well, yeah, I expect Brazil to be more interesting. I mean, off the back of last year, I mean, Brazil's always a good race. I think. I mean, if there's weather around, then even better. A wet Brazil race is one of the best spectacles in F1, I think. And I mean, yeah, I mean, Abu Dhabi snooze fest, I expect, but we'll see some good send offs, I think, in Abu Dhabi because obviously Vettel's not going to be around in F1
Yeah.
anymore. Ricardo's going to have at least a year out. Is there anyone else retiring? I can't remember.
Well,
I mean,
Nicholas
Mick Schumacher
Latifi is
might not be there. Well, Nicholas Latifi, I
yeah.
don't think he's going to have a great send off. I don't know. But Latifi got lapped by Albon this weekend. That's how slow he was. He lapped by the teammate in the same car. Oh, bloody hell. Yeah, I'm just going to
Um,
hope these next 2 races
but
spice
yeah,
things up a bit.
Mexico's gone, and next week is the Brazilian Grand Prix. But in other news, we've got Stoffel Van Dorn, former F1, former F1 driver, now and still Formula E driver. He he was named as Aston Martin's test and reserve driver. I believe you've got news on that.
Yeah, so I think Nico Hulkenberg is fulfilling that role at the moment, which sort of begs the question: where is Hulkenberg going to go now? We're not going to see any more Hulkenberg super sub for COVID anymore, which is a bit of a shame. But I think Van Dorn, I think he's a good driver. It didn't work out too well for him at McLaren. I think he got points in his debut race, which was a great start, but then couldn't really compete with Alonso. I think it was his teammate at the time. Then yeah, has obviously done all right in Formula E, and he now has this role in Formula One. I think he was Mercedes reserve driver in 2020. Um, I think when Hamilton um, caught COVID and Russell was brought in to step up, I think Van Dorn was a little bit cheesed off, if you like, that he didn't get that call up
Yeah,
being Mercedes reserve driver. But
yeah.
although I have heard rumours that Ricciardo is possibly going to be Mercedes test driver for next year, which should be an interesting one.
That
Um,
is
to,
interesting.
to
I
jump
did.
ship from to jump ship from Red Bull to Renault to McLaren and now to Mercedes is it's quite an interesting sort of route, if you like. Yeah, I mean, hopefully Ricardo's involved in F1 next year, and again, hopefully gets a seat in 2024. But I think Van Dorn is a good driver and arguably deserves a seat in F1 potentially. Um, I don't really see where he goes. I mean, maybe he's eyeing up the Aston Martin seat after Alonso does his 2 years, and maybe Alonso retires because he's what 41 now.
Yeah.
So yeah, will Alonso keep racing into his mid 40s? Depends, I suppose. But yeah, a solid appointment from Aston Martin, I think.
So slightly going off topic, but still in Formula One. One question that we can probably talk about in a future episode is that if if you're an F1 driver, your contract is coming to an end at the end of the season, and you've got nowhere to go in F1, i.e., all the teams and seats are taken for next year. However, you do have offers from other motorsport disciplines, including two-wheel drives like MotoGP. So my question is, if you had the choice to go to another motorsport discipline, where would you go? MotoGP, Formula E, Extreme E, etc., etc. I just thought, let's just ask the question there. Just a sneak
Yeah.
peek. Just a sneak peek, where
Uh,
would you go? So if McLaren
it wouldn't.
told you, if Zach Brown told you, I'm sorry, you're not gonna be here for next season. We've chosen Oscar Piastri and you've got nowhere to go. What would you do? Where would you go? And why?
uh, I mean, for me, it wouldn't be MotoGP. I just don't like bikes at all or
Oh
bike
yeah.
racing. I'm just not that interested. I suppose looking around, is it the Japanese like GT series?
Ooh.
I don't know. Those like where you're racing sort of like supercars and around like Suzuka and Japanese tracks. I think would be quite cool. Touring
Okay.
cars, British touring cars would be quite
Yeah.
fun. I think. Again, Formula E would be uh, quite like quite enjoyable. But I don't know why, but I think WEC World Endurance Championship I'd
Okay.
quite like. I sort of have a soft spot for endurance racing, and yeah, I'm not sure why. I mean, maybe because I admire just I mean, just the skill it takes to stay up for 24 hours, let alone
Yeah,
drive for 3 hour stints at a
oh.
time and try and get some sleep during the races is just incredible. And I've watched some IMSA sort of US endurance racing, and
Mhm.
I don't know why, but I just quite enjoy it with the different classes of cars all on the same track, all competing for essentially like four different race wins, if you like, all on one day. I think is just quite cool.
Yeah.
I quite like to. I quite like to watch a bit more. It's just a shame that it's not really broadcast anywhere. I think I haven't found many places that broadcast it. Yeah, I think WEC would be the one for me. If I couldn't race in F1, it would be endurance racing.
Okay. Okay.
What
Um,
about you?
I think for me, if Mercedes told me, "Oh, my contract has come to an end and I've got nowhere to go," I think, um, mm, I think Formula E because I just love the whole electric vibe to it, and like, the one thing about Formula E that stands out is managing your battery life, because it runs on battery, and like say if because say you have to finish the race with at least something, even if it's what 2%, because if you don't finish, then you're gonna be stuck. You know what I mean? But other than that, I would like to try GT, maybe touring cars, maybe that would be quite something.
I mean, I think over here in the UK, I think the touring cars are on not every weekend, but like every other weekend or something on ITV4. And I mean, probably about 10 years ago now, me and my dad used to watch it quite a bit. If the F1 wasn't on, and yeah, racing around tracks like Snetterton, Castle Combe, Donington, just sort of not big tracks, short tracks, but Brands Hatch as well, Fruxton. Um, it's just quite interesting. All the cars are pretty similar as well, and so the grid is. I mean, it's a packed grid as well. There's like 20 odd cars on there. So yeah, it's at a much slower speed around F1 with around much smaller tracks, but it's just interesting seeing all
Yeah,
the cars close together, and you think it's more of a question of skill rather than who designs the best car because the cars are essentially normal family saloons. Like you got, I mean, back in the day you had like Vauxhall Vectras up against Ford Mondeos and stuff like that, and there's like Honda Civics now racing against some other cars. I can't remember. I haven't watched it in a while actually. But yeah, the cars are just so close together, and in terms of sort of speed and that's actual physical proximity on the racetrack as well. It's quite cool, and you've seen some pretty spectacular accidents as well in touring cars, which I mean is good and not good, as I suppose, because and you don't want to see drivers get hurt, but at the same time, it
yeah.
is quite fun in a sort of sad way to watch a crash and cars go flying. But yeah, yeah, soft spot for endurance racing and touring cars for me.
Well, that's just a small preview of that, that topic when one for the future, if you like. So, well, I believe we've come to the end of another episode of the F1 Stop show. Mexico was probably one of, if not the most boring race of this season. That's right, Monaco. You we've got a new winner now. But Monaco, we still don't like you. It's all right. Anyway, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and you can also email us at f1stopshow@gmail.com. The Brazil Grand Prix is next, the penultimate race. That will be next weekend. So not this weekend as we're recording, but the one after. And the last race, final race of 2022 is Abu Dhabi. So I've been your host, Samoni, and it's a goodbye from me. Bye bye. And it's a goodbye from Wes.
Bye.
And see you soon for the Brazil Grand Prix next weekend.